Hello, this is Lisa Piper, author of A Mile Below Paradise, The Lost City of Airdrie. My novel was published in 2010, and I was looking back over my research files and I thought, maybe some of Airdrie's fans would like to see some of the mostly amateur photos and videos that I took during my years of researching Muhlenberg County, Kentucky's hidden treasure. If you haven't read my book, you will likely be amazed at who actually owned, operated, or visited the ruins that are now wasting away near the Green River. I've been blessed to have people send me their own photographs that they've taken over the years when they visited Airdrie, so I'm going to be including several of those videos and photographs taken by fellow adventurers. Other than seeing the stone house and furnace from a boat on the Green River, I haven't set foot on Airdrie Hill since I was about 13 years old. I instantly became a fan, like so many of you that have been there before. When a friend of mine saw that Bobby Anderson had compiled a book on the records of Airdrie, she had him sign a copy for me. I was so excited to get it. My first act of research was to read the articles in Bobby's book over and over again until a story began to form. That was just a launching pad for my research. So I'm going to start with the mastermind behind the Lost City and begin telling you the real story behind the ruins at Airdrie Hill. As you set your eyes on the Airdrie remains, you are beholding the dream of a man who left a permanent mark on the Bluegrass State. The large stones that make a staircase down Airdrie Hill were trodden upon by some of the most innovative people in history. It is said that politicians, statesmen, and war heroes walked up that hill. In order to tell you the story properly, I will start out by telling you about Robert Sproul Crawford Aitchison Alexander, and I'm hoping I'm saying Aitchison properly. It could be Eichson, I'm not sure. Although his father was a wealthy native of Scotland, Robert was born in Frankfort, Kentucky in 1819. His grandfather had been Lord Provost of Edinburgh in Scotland. Robert's uncle, Sir William Alexander II, had no heirs, and he needed to pass along the family title and estate, so it was decided that his nephew Robert would travel from Kentucky to his uncle's home in Scotland to be educated and prepared for inheriting his uncle's vast estate as well as his title. At the age of 13, little Robert was sent to live at the House of Airdrie in Scotland with his uncle, Sir William Alexander II. During the years that followed, Robert studied in London and in France. He learned to speak Latin and French. Robert traveled extensively and went to parties with the other titled families and with those of great wealth. Robert grew to 5'6" and he fell in love with Scotland. He did not intend to move back to his birthplace in Kentucky. I recovered a letter where he asked his father to move to Scotland and educate his siblings there. He missed his family while living abroad. Little did the young man know that he would one day return to Kentucky and forever alter the course of the Bluegrass State. His influence would infiltrate Kentucky with the sounds and tone of the land of Scotland. I unearthed a collection of letters written by young Robert. Several documents, including his will, are located at a repository at the Newberry Library in Chicago. As you can imagine, as I studied his family, they became very real to me. When I unearthed that there were actual letters, I was so excited I looked for a way to get to Chicago, but I could not at the time. I was so excited when I learned of the existence of letters and I would actually see Robert's handwriting with my own eyes, that I was willing to pay the cost of having copies made and shipped to me. I waited impatiently to read the words that Robert had written to his siblings and his parents. When the packet arrived, I had much difficulty deciphering the script. I showed the letters to a former English teacher, Joanne Jones, and she was able to easily read it with just little difficulty. She took the letters and transcribed them, and it was from these letters that I learned much about Robert's personality. I found him honest, generous, kind, forthright, and a caring man. My favorite letter is the one he wrote to his mother when he was being educated in France at the age of 20. Here is an excerpt from what he called the longest letter he had ever written. The date on the letter was 1839. Now, I'm not very good at dialects, so I'm just going to read it in my regular voice. Here goes his letter. We have our meals with the head of the establishment, which is generally considered a great privilege at these kind of places. But I don't think we are much better off than the boys, except that we have separate rooms. Our manner of living is entirely French. In the morning, about 8 o'clock, we have a bowl holding about 3 cups full of what is called café au lait. That is about half a teacup full of coffee and between 3 and 4 times as much hot boiled milk. The café au lait I think excellent if made well and with strong coffee. I advise you to try it. You have nothing to do but have a new pan of milk boiled regularly and brought to table with the coffee. Here we have toasted bread and crumble it into the coffee, which I think is a great improvement to both. Then you must eat it as you would soup with big spoons. This makes an excellent breakfast when you have meat in the middle of the day, as the French always do. Our second meal is in the middle of the day, when we have, as I said all Frenchmen had, meat and one kind of vegetable each, of which is generally eaten separately. As dessert, we have some pears, grapes, or some other fruit. The dinner, which is at 6 o'clock, is pretty much the same as the meal in the middle of the day, except that we have soup. I have given you an account of my manner of living. I must now give you one of how my time is spent. The English fellow who is here is a chemist and has given me a taste for that science. I am very much interested in it at present, but how long I shall be so I can't say. The beginning of chemistry is very amusing, as there are many amusing experiments, but after a short time there is more work than amusement if you are not very much interested in it. I do not expect ever to be a good chemist, but this is a science with which everybody should have some acquaintance, and particularly myself, if ever I am to have anything to do with iron mines and coal pits, as mineralogy is a branch of or very intimately connected with chemistry. I therefore spend most of my spare time in studying chemistry, and if I stick to it for the next 6 months, I hope by that time to acquire more knowledge of it than most people do not intend to be chemists. My other time is spent entirely with French. I wish you could persuade Father to write to my uncle about my going to America next summer. I know that he wished me to make the best use of my time, and that was his reason for saying I had better not go this summer which is past. I know also that if I should say I wish to go, that he would tell me to do so, but if Father would write, I think it would have more weight. Robert was named after his own father. An interesting tidbit was that his father, Robert Alexander, had also been educated in France, where he became acquainted with Benjamin Franklin while Franklin was ambassador to the French court. Franklin took a great liking to Alexander and made him his secretary. When Franklin returned to America, Robert Alexander followed him there. When Franklin died in 1790, Alexander moved to the new state of Kentucky, where he became a state senator and the president of the Bank of Kentucky in Frankfort. My source there is the Pedigree of the Week with Frank Marion. Isn't it interesting that the reason that our Robert Alexander was born in Frankfort was because of his dad's relationship with Benjamin Franklin? While in Scotland, Robert's interest in horses never waned. He had a great interest in breeding horses, and it seemed to be a great passion. When Robert Alexander inherited his uncle's fortune, he was considered to be among the wealthiest young men in the world. After some years had passed, Scotland began experiencing some great hardships. Not only was the potato famine having an effect on the farms, but soon the news came that the Black Band iron ore was depleting, and the Alexander family was in the iron ore business. This left Lord Robert Alexander with a quandary. An idea came to him to expand the business back into America. He was innovative, so he sent his geologists to America to find iron ore. In the spring of 1850, Lord Alexander received word that there was a discovery of iron ore in Kentucky that would meet the requirements Lord Alexander had dreamed to find. His geologist, Charles Hendry, wrote of the land that was available for purchase, and the property was situated 1 mile below the town called Paradise. So that's why I named my book A Mile Below Paradise, Lost City of Airdrie. Paradise is no longer a city there, but it used to be. Lord Alexander purchased 17,000 acres of land in Muhlenberg County, Kentucky. He had a belief that there were no better workers or miners than in Scotland, so he intended to take his good workers with him. He recruited 25 Scottish men who caught the vision to continue the business in America. They all agreed to sail with their families to what would become the new Airdrie in the spring of 1854. A plan was made for provision for their transportation as well as resources to build 25 cottages. These little homes would be equipped with a kitchen, a hall, and 2 rooms. There was already a mansion on the property that he purchased called the McLean House. I want to tell you how that came about. Judge Olney McLean was the first county surveyor of Muhlenberg and laid out the town of Greenville in 1799. Judge McLean was a friend of Henry Clay. The judge's son William built the McLean House in the 1830s. After Lord Robert Alexander purchased the property, the mansion was renamed the Alexander House. It is interesting, I think, to know that McLean County was so named in order to honor this Judge Olney McLean. Among the Scots who worked and lived in Airdrie was the popular Archibald Pollock. In Otto Rother's book, A History of Muhlenberg County, he records that Archibald Pollock was one of the jolliest of the Scotslanders, and he was a champion fist fighter. As I was preparing for the printing of my novel, imagine my wonderful delight when I discovered Archie had a son named after him. The name was kept with each generation, and I found his great-grandson. He and his wife still live in Muhlenberg County. He is a retired Army colonel. I confess that when I got the opportunity to meet A.D. and his wife, I was so excited. I felt like I was meeting a superstar. It was at this time that he shared with me some of his photographs that he took at Airdrie, as well as pictures of his family. He helped make my book signing so much fun. He dressed up in the family Scottish kilt and even signed books for those who asked him to do so. This is a picture of his great-grandmother surrounded by her family, and this is a Pollock picnic dated 1922 to Mammoth Cave. When the miners sailed from Scotland, it was expected that it would only take 6 weeks to get to their destination. However, it took much longer. After colliding with a waterlogged vessel, it caused the ship to change its course. They landed not in Philadelphia, but in New York. After arriving in America, the Scots traveled down the Ohio River to Louisville, Kentucky. After a delay in Louisville, the group traveled in steamboats up the Green River to their new home. Lord Alexander was committed to the bold venture to build an iron ore empire and city at Airdrie, as evidenced by the large sum of his investment. Before the plan was over, Lord Robert Alexander freely spent $350,000, most of which was spent in transportation and care for the miners and workers in the 1850s. When the Scottish families arrived in Muhlenberg County at the new Airdrie, they went right to work. Before long, they erected the stack and the 3-story building that you can still see in ruins today. The Green River would be used for transportation and hopefully to transport their product. It was expected that important guests would be housed at Airdrie, so a hotel was built. In addition, Airdrie had its own post office. The city was alive with dreams and activity. Lord Alexander returned to Kentucky and traveled to Airdrie. He left the settlement shortly after arriving to go visit his sisters near Frankfort. He often traveled abroad looking for the right horses for his horse farm that he operated on his family's property in Midway near Frankfort. The year 1855 came, and Airdrie was a wonder to those who saw it. The cottages were built, the stone house was nearly finished, and the furnace was in the process of being erected. The furnace, designed by John Hendry, was a rounded iron shell stack on a 26-foot square stone basis. The total height is nearly 50 feet. The problem with the work at Airdrie was not that the people were lazy or unwilling. The oversight was that the Scots had been used to dealing with a different type of material. The revelation that they were handling their resources improperly came too late. In 1857, Lord Robert Alexander had enough, and he ordered that on November the 10th, operations would cease. He was very successful at horse breeding, and the Airdrie adventure had not provided anything but a depletion to his wealth. Sadly enough, on November the 9th, one day before the closing, the Scotsmen created a way to properly process the iron ore so that they could be successful. But it was too late. Lord Robert Alexander had enough. He had made up his mind, and the business was closed. The people of Airdrie tried to survive in the new city, but without the iron ore business, there was no reason for visitors to come to Airdrie and no work for its citizens. One by one, the families began to disperse into Muhlenberg, Ohio, Hopkins, Butler, and Christian counties. Many of the men, including Archibald Pollock, joined the war effort and fought in the Civil War. Archie joined the 17th Kentucky Regiment, commanded by Colonel McHenry, and he fought at Shiloh and Perryville. When McHenry was relieved at his command, Archie left the war effort and returned to Muhlenberg County. Only the most persistent of the Airdrie residents stayed on in the nearly deserted community. With few people left, the post office closed on May 26, 1859, and was reopened in the neighboring city of Paradise. While Airdrie had been a dismal failure, Robert Alexander was having success with his venture Woodburn Stud. It seems that the failure of Airdrie did not dampen his spirits for taking risks. Around 1858, Robert Alexander purchased a blind racehorse named Lexington for $15,000. This was the highest price ever paid for an American horse at the time, and Lexington's bones are located in the Smithsonian Institute and became known as the Blind Hero of Woodburn. I did go to the Smithsonian Institute to find it, but I did not find Lexington there. It could have been because just me, but I couldn't find it. Mary Jean Wall wrote in the Horse Race Insider that Lexington's success as a sire made Woodburn Stud near synonymous with flat racing thoroughbreds. In the mid to late 1800s, Woodburn was where the standard-bred horse originated, and the farm was best known for these trotting horses for harness racing. Alexander took what had been a hobby of the antebellum gentry class into the new realm of the business world, organizing his stud farm on a model of efficiency. He understood record-keeping and marketing concepts when others had not. He played a key role in saving Kentucky's claim as the nation's horse breeding capital at a time when this notion no longer rested secure. Robert Aitchison Alexander built Woodburn Stud into one of the leading horse breeding operations in the United States, known for producing champion thoroughbred and standardbred racehorses throughout the remainder of the 19th century. General Ulysses S. Grant's favorite horse was named Cincinnati and was the most famous horse during the American Civil War. Cincinnati was a thoroughbred and was the son of Lexington. Two horses, including Cincinnati, lived at the White House stables in 1869. If you remember in your Civil War history, General Grant and General Buell both led Union armies at the Battle of Shiloh. Don Carlos Buell commanded armies at Shiloh and Perryville. It's interesting to me that Archie Pollock was among the men who fought in both battles. It is conceivable that General Don Carlos Buell heard about the Airdrie furnace from perhaps Archie or one of the other Scottish soldiers. It was the close of the Civil War, and Buell was in search for an oil field from which to work. The war had left him with a desire to run his own business. He had lived in Marietta, Ohio, but had heard about the rise and fall of Airdrie. He also heard about how the land was rich with minerals, and indeed it was. The meeting with Alexander and his representative was successful, and Buell made a deal to lease Alexander's 17,000 acres, including the land of Airdrie. This marked a whole new era for Airdrie, and the Alexander House then became known as Buell House. General Buell moved his wife Margaret and stepdaughter Nanny Mason to Airdrie in 1867. Lord Alexander passed away at the age of about 48. He was considered the wealthiest man in Kentucky. His heirs sold 1,000 of the Airdrie acres to Buell in exchange for him breaking the lease on the land so that the family could sell the remaining 16,000 acres in Muhlenberg County. His land would include the mansion and the Airdrie furnace. General Buell continued his search for oil with an even greater intensity. After he purchased the property, he had high hopes for his business and he called it Airdrie Petroleum Company. Buell searched long enough to find that all he was finding was large deposits of coal. With this knowledge, he decided to change to the coal business. Foreigners, dignitaries, and Kentucky pioneers frequented the Buell House. Word spread about the coal mine opening and hope was stirred up in the community. Excitement would turn to anger when Buell found out that his plan for success would be hindered by an arrangement concerning the Green River. An agreement was made with the state of Kentucky that would jeopardize all that Buell had worked to accomplish. He needed the Green River to transport his product, but the Green and Barren Rivers Navigation Company took control of the Green River and began the plan to charge such high freight prices it would make turning a profit impossible. The general began appealing to the state legislature to do something about the unfair use of the river. The battle would be the longest one he ever endured. General Buell used every resource he could to fight the navigation company. Sadly enough, he was petitioning in the capital city when he received news that would forever change his life. It was August the 10th, 1881. His wife had passed away at the Buell residence at Airdrie. Buell grieved the loss of his wife, as evident in one of the poems that he wrote. His sister moved to the Buell house at Airdrie with his stepdaughter Nanny Mason. It is interesting to take note that a 10-year-old named Margaret Penman worked at the Buell mansion as a housekeeper in 1880. Later, she married Archie Pollock, the son of Airdrie's Archie that I mentioned in the book. Margaret Penman Pollock moved to a home in 1928 that still stands on Cherry Street in Greenville today. Buell continued to travel and investigate litigation over the Green River. In his travels, he met a man in charge of the construction of the new Eddyville, Kentucky Penitentiary. It was 1884 and Buell was still fighting for the river. Willing to help the government in any way he could, he agreed to permit 15 prisoners to come to Airdrie and retrieve stone for use in the building of the new prison. There has been a myth for years that Airdrie was a prison. John Prine's song Paradise has a verse that reads this: "Daddy, won't you take me back to Muhlenberg County, down by the Green River where paradise lay? Well, I'm sorry, my son, but you're too late in asking. Mr. Peabody's coal train has hauled it away." Well, sometimes we'd travel right down the Green River to the abandoned old prison down by Airdrie Hill. That myth was immortalized in that song. The general used the stone house to shelter the inmates. Word spread through the community that Buell was using the prisoners to start the furnace once more. He paid little attention to the rumors. The transportation of the stone was not easy. The prisoners only stayed a few months before General Lyons found stone closer to the prison building site. When that happened, the prisoners were moved from Airdrie, but even today, the prisoner rumor still exists. You will hear locals call the place Old Airdrie, the old prison, or just Airdrie. The general's sister passed away in 1885. After 15 years of fighting the navigation company, Buell had success. The general had worked hard for his country and for the land, but he did a whole lot for the community by fighting the unfair charges for the use of the river. The federal government purchased the Green River. Buell won a victory for all of those who would ever sail or use the river. But by this time, however, much of the equipment was ruined and the business just did not work out as he planned. General Buell remained secluded in his home, except for the guests that he entertained. He was a kind man, welcoming his neighbors and friends. General Buell was somewhat of an inventor. In my research, I read that he made a dishwashing machine in his carpenter shop, but never had it patented. 41 years and 9 days after the Airdrie Iron Works closed, General Buell died in the Alexander Buell Mansion on November the 11th, 1898. Nanny moved to Louisville after Buell died. She sold Airdrie to the 5J Coal Company in 1908. I obtained a copy of Nanny's death certificate on file in Frankfort, but I had no other information on where she was buried. On October the 27th, 1907, the historic Buell Mansion caught fire and burned to the ground. I spent 10 hours on a trip to Frankfurt to find out more information on Nanny and on the Alexander family. Here are some videos I made to commemorate the trip. You'll notice in the footage a portrait of Robert Alexander. You'll also see a video of me looking for the portrait of Governor Buckner. He is the son of the man who built what is known as the Buckner Stack. It is located 15 miles from Old Airdrie. When the governor was a teen, he actually worked there at the iron ore works as a clerk. Hi, this is Lisa Piper here to you from Mary Lou's car. We're on our big adventure to Frankfurt today, and as I was looking out the window, I just wanted to show you, why do I love Kentucky? Well, one of the things is because it is so beautiful. Look at this view as we are going down the road. I hope that I'm doing this accurately. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't Kentucky gorgeous? It's a beautiful day. We're going to the History Museum, to the old Capitol, maybe to a graveyard, and also to a candy factory. Gorgeous. Notice in this structure that there are no windows. That's because he put no windows in it. Why are there no windows in the old Capitol building?
I think for security purposes, that's why he had a rotunda built that would let light in.
At the top?
At the very top.
Can we even see that from here? I'm standing right here in front of the Capitol, and we've had a great day. We're doing research for R.A. Alexander, and he did a lot of business here in Frankfurt. He lived in Midway, which is about 10 miles or so, I believe, outside of the town. Mary Lou and I just came out of the library here at the History Museum, and I have a copy of Nanny Mason's death certificate. And she died by malignment of ovaries. I have no idea what that is, but we'll find out. And she died at Sacred Heart Home here in Louisville. We're not in Louisville right now. So it's an exciting day, more adventures ahead. Okay, here's the deal. I've been doing research on Simon Bolivar Buckner. I've been doing research, and every time I go to find him, something's missing. Like I went to Bardstown to look at his real frock that he used. Couldn't find it. It was supposed to be there, but I couldn't find it. So we come today to the historical place in Frankfurt, which is totally awesome. And all of the governors of Kentucky, just get a shot down there of that hall. All of those governors. You can look at their pictures. Their portraits are awesome. Okay, come over here. But the one that I want, the one I came to see, missing in action. He's not here. Again, I think there's a conspiracy against me.
Look at that guy.
I hate to make fun of a former governor, but Thomas Metcalf, you had a bad hair day, buddy. So we are downtown Frankfurt, sitting at Gibby's and having a lunch break from our big adventures today. Yum, she's having the ham and cheese special. Looks yummy. And I'm having a chicken parmesan.
We've been to the old Capitol building and to the history museum.
Yes.
And we are headed to the candy factory for a tour and a little sampling. At the old Capitol building, we found a picture of Robert Alexander that was donated by Libby Jones, and had some information on there, as well as his grandmother. A portrait of her was hanging up there, and another portrait of interest. So we're having a great day. It's not over yet. We're still having our big adventures, but right now we're going to eat a little something something. We just went on a tour through the candy factory.
Better. Oh yeah.
Incredible candy store. There's our tour guide.
Yay!
And it's still called Rebecca Ruth, right?
Yeah.
And this is the home of the first chocolate bourbon ball.
Good.
Hey, this is Lisa Piper. We're on an adventure in Frankfort, Kentucky. Down here you'll see a beautiful part of downtown Frankfort, and there's a passageway to a walking bridge. If we had seen this walking bridge an hour or two ago, we would have gone straight to where we were looking for, but no, we circled all downtown. Finally, we got to this destination, but just now we discovered, after coming out of the Capitol building, we could have gone right across the street and right to our destination, which proves there should be human walking GPSs. I'm just saying. It's a great idea. Benjamin Franklin. Called maps. We had a map and we couldn't figure it out. We got lost. Completely Mary Lou's fault. And we found graffiti. We went to a part of downtown that had graffiti. That's how sad it was. We are at the Capitol. Isn't that gorgeous? Now we're on the Bluegrass Parkway coming home.
When I found out that Buell was transported all the way to St. Louis to be buried next to Margaret, I was intrigued. It could not have been an easy transport to take a body that far in 1898. My daughter and I traveled to Bellefontaine Cemetery in St. Louis to have a look around, to get the site in my mind for when I was writing the book, and I'm so glad we did. My mouth dropped open. I found General Buell all right. I also found another general laid to rest in the same lot. General Richard Barnes Mason had been buried there in 1850. Yes, Margaret's first husband was none other than the former military governor of California, who wrote the official report that led to the California Gold Rush. And to make matters more exciting, General Mason was a descendant of George Mason, the famous founding father who was a member of the Continental Congress and of the National Convention that framed the Constitution of the United States of America. George Mason was friends with George Washington and the principal author of the state of Virginia's Bill of Rights. I had been hot on the trail of Nanny Mason, not realizing whose DNA she was carrying. Our trip to Bellefontaine Cemetery unveiled several mysteries. If you want an adventure, Bellefontaine is just beautiful. It is recognized as an arboretum as well as a sculptural museum and founded in 1849. There are over 86,000 graves and miles of roadway. One thing to note on your trip is that General Buell's wife is the only woman to be buried between two generals. Margaret's first husband, General Mason, has the most exquisite gravestone. It is incredible, as you can see from these pictures. I'm going to read you a description of the stone from the Tales from Bellefontaine Cemetery by Carol Faring Shepley. Mason's wife and daughters erected one of the cemetery's most noteworthy monuments to his memory. John Struthers, a Philadelphia artist who also made George Washington's gravestone, carved it of dark brown freestone. A cannon, cannonballs, kegs, and ropes are piled, rising powerfully from one end to the other. A shroud covers them as if they are dead and in mourning. It is a simple but eloquent tribute to a consummate soldier. As you can see by my photographs, the work is a piece of art. After being out in the elements for over 167 years, it is still something amazing to behold. I just assumed that the lot had been purchased and owned by General George Mason, and that his wife and her family was buried there because he owned it, but that's not true. The lot was owned by Elizabeth Margaret Mason Buell. Now, if you look at the lot, there's still room for people to be buried, but they never will be because the family stopped there. General Buell didn't have any more children, and all of Elizabeth's children passed away. There are 6 graves on the spacious lot. As it turns out, Margaret Mason Buell knew much pain. The first grave had been her 4-year-old, followed by her husband, General Mason. Then another daughter died at the age of 27 in 1864. And then the 4th had been Margaret, then Buell, and the 6th grave I saw belonged to Elizabeth Mary Ann Sally Mason. And I thought, who in the world is that? But guess what? That was the real name of Miss Nanny. Before going to Bellefontaine, I had looked at a photograph of Buell's marker, but I could not find Nanny. It all came together when I was there at the site. Nanny did not have her own grave marker. After my book was published, I was so happy to get to talk with Bobby Anderson. Bobby told me that he would no longer publish his book on Airdrie, and he gave me permission to print it. He said that he wasn't going to do anything with it, and he gave me all of his files and his blessing. Can you imagine that? Our plan was to put a cover on it to go with my book, but as of this date, I have not done that. Bobby did an excellent job of gathering newspaper clippings and other data on Airdrie, and at some point, I hope to do as he instructed and put his work into print once more. As you can imagine, Lexington is just breathtaking, and the farm where Lord Alexander bred horses and lived is now Airdrie Stud, and it's located in Midway, Kentucky. Here I am on a visit to the farm.
And I'm at Airdrie Stud Farm, where there are the stallions from the farmer in here. We just went to see them, and they're mean looking. Big, beautiful horses. I'm so glad to be here on the property that Lord Alexander owned and bred some of the most awesome horses there ever was. This is the Airdrie Stud Barn. Man, it's clean. This is Brothers Derek. Hi! Oh my. Stevie Wonder Boy. Hey, baby. I don't trust that horse either. Are you a wild man? Oh.
Oh,
They got.
gross.
Did you get snotted?
Got snotted on.
How beautiful. Well, hello. Don't worry, we're not putting our hand anywhere near you.
This one is.
The first time I went there, I didn't get to go in because of the season they were breeding. And honestly, the beauty and size of those beasts is a little much to take in. And truthfully, I didn't trust them. They had a look in their eye. I guess if you're going to win a race, then you are going to have a certain look in your eye, but I didn't trust those horses. You can just guess how my imagination was stirred as I once more walked where Lord Alexander had been. I was so excited to be on this farm. By the way, he never went by Lord. I just add that on there. That wasn't relevant in the United States. So he never demanded anyone call him Sir Alexander or anything else. One more thing. I get asked sometimes about the mystery item that's in my book. When you read my novel and I describe the iron doorstop, I did not create that object. I read about it and that there were many of them made back over 100 years ago, but I cannot find one. When I go to Luke's flea market, I always look for the thing. I've memorized what it looks like in my head. My thought was that if I made it a part of my book, someone might recognize what it is one day and make it known. I talk about Greenville's famed flea market in my book, and here's some footage I took while doing research on my novel. I found Luke himself in the barn, and I had a conversation with him about Airdrie.
Hey, we're headed to Luke's flea market on Memorial Day 2010, and you can't even get in right now. We are going exploring for some Airdrie treasure and look for some other things. But take a look at that, how busy it is. This is Greenville, and I don't know how long we're going to be here in line waiting to try to get in. Luke's flea market is in my book, A Mile from Paradise, Lost City of Airdrie. And my characters go traveling there to try to find a treasure. And so hopefully, every time I come here, I look for the treasure. So maybe today we'll find it. I've got Kirsty and Joy with me, and maybe they'll find the treasure. And if we find it, we're gonna act really cool so they don't jack the price up, and hopefully purchase it. I'm owning it if I find it.
Green, found on the picnic table outside concession 1. Tinkerbell, sippy cup, coming, get it at the Red Barn.
This is, in my book, in Luke's Flea Market, this is the famous Red Barn, and this is all of Luke's collection in here. Can't buy anything on here, but you might see Luke, and you might find some old things that you may not see anywhere else. So, we haven't been very successful at finding Airdrie's treasure today, but let's go in and take a look at Luke's stuff. Old stuff. Luke's collection. Oh, baby bed. You did?
Yeah.
I didn't know
I
that.
used to go to old Airdrie when I was a little old boy swimming in the river over there, you know.
Really?
When the old man still had a grocery store on the side.
Who had a grocery store by Airdrie? Do you know?
He was, I believe his name was Anderson, I'm not sure. He sold it and bought right down the road here about a half a mile and lived till he died down there.
I didn't know you were 80.
Yep,
Wow.
80 years old, March 4th.
Well, you've got a good collection.
Yeah, I've been collecting 35 years.
35 years.
And it's not for sale. It's just to look at it. I'm going to look at it till I die and they can throw it away or give it. I don't care what they do.
See you later.
Okay. Okay, y'all make yourself at home.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
No. Go with the desert.
I hope you've enjoyed some of my collections with my research, and if you haven't read it, there are more details in my novel, A Mile Below Paradise, Lost City of Airdrie. This is Lisa. God bless, and thanks for sharing this time with me.